targeted tourists in Kashmir's Pahalgam.
Why does the US keep supporting Pakistan?
Foreign policy isn't about friendships. So Pakistan sits on the most dangerous neighborhood on earth, in my opinion. In the US's calculation, right, their interest is to engage with Pakistan because what is the alternative? Walking away from a nuclear state with that much instability, that's a worse choice, right? That's a bad deal. Leaves Pakistan alone. It's worse for US allies, it's worse for US interests. What India does really well is that they have their own interests first.
I'm entitled to have my own side, I'm entitled to weigh my own interests, make my own choice.
Pakistan controls Taliban access on those border crossings. They control refugee flow. The biggest strength for India is that India serves India's best interests. India's biggest weakness, they got some of the best intelligence services in the world, legitimately like world-class intelligence services. But the problem is there's so much capability locked in on Pakistan.
If the US and India stop working together tomorrow, what the change in Asia over the next 10 years? So according to you, what scares you the more? The government spying us on the private companies, owing every click, message, and the locations that we can.
But the real aspects to the everyday person is so much more scary than that, and that's private companies.
So do you believe that the social media apps right now, that whatever we have, that is coming under the gray zone? People are thinking about that. I don't believe in the privacy. I have nothing to hide about life. So they are mostly putting the post in the social media. Okay. According to you, is it a more dangerous than thinking? Just be blunt, okay? Why does the US keep supporting Pakistan?
So I want to be clear here, okay? There's a quote that's shared inside of the intelligence community. There are no permanent relationships, only permanent interests. You may have heard of it, right? So here's what nobody's going to tell you or say out loud inside the intelligence community. Foreign policy isn't about friendships. It's about having leverage and risk management. That's what it's really about. So Pakistan sits on the most dangerous neighborhood on earth, in my opinion, right? It has nuclear weapons, Taliban's right next door, China is investing billions, India is their major rival. So in the US's calculation, right, their interest is to engage with Pakistan because what is the alternative? Walking away from a nuclear state with that much instability, that's a worse choice, right? That's a bad deal for the US. So it's going to be worse if the US just leaves Pakistan alone. It's worse for US allies. It's worse for US interests. That's why there's a relationship between the US and Pakistan.
So is there another reasons that maybe that India is not sharing the information to USA? So USA needs a spy to get the information from India. So they hire the officers from the Pakistans and deploy to India.
So that's spycraft, right? That goes back into shared interests. What India does really well is that they have their own interests first. So does America. If you can use tools, because what you're describing is a validation of what something is being said. So in diplomacy, if one person or one diplomat says something, Let's go hire a spy or convince a spy to make sure what they are saying is true. So when we go and we negotiate on the next deal, we know that person isn't talking bullshit, right? They're talking that what they're saying aligns with what is actually happening in the background. That's why that happens.
Okay. So if I say, forget the diplomacy, if you want to describe in a one sentence about the relationship between the US and the Pakistan, what would be?
So if because it is a relationship, right?
Yeah.
And if I were to state what that relationship is, it's the kind of relationship that you stay in because the divorce that you will have will be worse, right? So imagine if your divorce included letting a nuclear state go, right? So just think about this for a second. The divorce would be would be leading towards nuclear instability. It would be sure that Beijing is going to fill that power vacuum that the U.S. had, right? Not to mention the massive terrorism blind spot that you're leaving. And don't forget the fallout from Afghanistan, because Pakistan controls Taliban access on those border crossings. They control refugee flow, all from Pakistan, right? That means the US, that means allies won't have any leverage to influence what happens and comes and goes. So like that is what you're talking about whenever you divorce from that bad marriage.
I agree. Okay. According to you, that what is the India's biggest strength right now, and what's the weakness that nobody's talk about?
Okay, yeah. So the biggest strength for India is that India serves India's best interests. So I know that sounds a bit repetitive, but think about all the countries that aren't serving their own interests, right? You got a dozen or more right there in Europe. You have a dozen or more right there in Africa. Just think about that for a second. So we call those countries that serve other countries' interests proxies, or we also call them client states, right? Because they're a client. We're just sending them some things, and they're going to go and do that other thing that we need them to do. So what is India's biggest strength? They don't bend to other countries' preferences. So they think about this for a second. Like they bought Russian oil when the US or the West in total said, don't do that. And they didn't apologize. They didn't have major repercussions. They maintained ties with Iran, Israel, Saudi, Russia, all simultaneously. Now, that's someone who puts their interests first, regardless of another nation's trait and what they're trying to impose on them. I'd say that is India's biggest strength. Now, I think this might be a little controversy, but India's biggest weakness, they got some of the best intelligence services in the world, legitimately like world-class intelligence services. But the problem is there's so much capability locked in on Pakistan. So like, I get it. Pakistan is an existential threat. There's constant friction. Like you can't ignore that kind of thing. I get it. But the problem there is that that threat is going to limit India's long-term growth. And it's not Pakistan. Pakistan is a short-term intermediate issue, right? The real problem that India is going to face is China. It's the technology race. It's the economic competition that occurs 10, 20, 30 years from now. Not just what's happening this week, not just what's happening next month.
I agree. So do you think that that could be the biggest weakness that hurt India for a long time, right?
I think so.
Okay. So till now, that what is the smartest move that India has been made in the last 20 years?
Yeah, it's refusing to pick a side, right? Like they were able to manage to still have partnerships that still benefit India to this day. So everything in diplomacy, everything in intelligence revolves around relationships and interests of those relationships. Where do they align? So for the United States, they joined the Quad, that being the US, India, Japan, Australia. basically it was counter China in the Pacific Club without calling it that, right? That's really what it was. They signed defense deals that bought American drones, and then they kept buying Russian oil and Iranian energy at the same time anyways, right? That's what India can do. So like whenever Ukraine happened, for example, and the West wanted Russia isolated, India became the biggest oil customer from Russia. They got it at a discount and then they sold it back to Europe, right? So, and like, don't even get me started on China. Like, so they were, what was it called? So they were part of the Quad, which is essentially countering Beijing, right? They were also part of BRICS, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. BRICS. They're basically we're not the West and we want our own economic table type of thing. That's what BRICS was. And they were also part of SCO, right? Which was part of China, Russia, India, Pakistan, and Iran, I believe. SCO is the Eurasian Security Organization where rivals sit in the same room. So India is both competing and cooperating with the same world powers as their adversaries at the same time. So like if that's not incredible to think about, that is what India has been doing for the past 20 years, and they continue to do well, that a lot of countries aren't, because a lot of countries compromise and change their directives.
So how that USA is seeing these particular situations, if suppose the China, India, and the Russia will all come together, what is the US perspective about this situation?
So like if it happened all at the same time?
Yeah.
So like if I were to write it down on a piece of paper, I would say that is a nightmare scenario, right? Some nightmare scenario for the US specifically, I think, in my opinion. You're talking about really 40, I think it's like 40% of the world's population with those three countries. You're talking about two nuclear powers plus India. You're talking about the world's manufacturing base. You're talking about the world's energy reserves, the world's biggest emerging markets, all aligned against the US. That's a nightmare scenario. But that's on paper, right? So the reality is that won't happen. The reason it won't happen is, well, because India and China, they're not allies. They're rivals who occasionally sit at the same table, right? So BRICS isn't a military alliance. It's an economic club where everyone agrees that the West is annoying. That's not the same as we're going to fight together. That's not the same thing, right? So I want you to remember that that's exactly why Quad existed. That's why Quad exists. The US doesn't need India to love America. They need India to not align with China. As long as Delhi and Beijing don't trust each other, they don't cooperate, they don't have that trilateral nightmare in development, it just won't happen, right?
So do you believe that both have a kind of a relationship in a Gen Z language it's a situationship?
It's a situationship. Yeah, that's what a lot of countries are. It's a situationship where everyone is trying to cheat on each other, but also share everyone else's gift that they gave the other person, right?
Exactly.
It's really what's happening.
Okay, now if the US and India stop working together tomorrow, what the change in Asia over the next 10 years?
What would change in the next 10 years? That's a really good question. So I think what would end up happening is you start to see what I mentioned earlier, right? That's going to degrade for India. That's going to degrade for the United States. If they decided to do something different and it starts amplifying in that way, you can see where the same culture or the same frameworks that occur right now for stability, for manufacturing, for energy, for oil, for cooperation, it just won't work. You can see how this starts to collapse economically. You can see how China starts taking over of pretty much all of Asia without US interdiction, right? That is what really happens.
So do you believe that US does have any kind of a threats to any from any country?
Did you say that again?
Does the US has any kind of a threats from any country?
If the US has any sort of threat against any other country,
Mm-hmm.
I think the answer to that, like economically, it's China. That's no contestation. In terms of manufacturing, that could for sure be India. However, India and US have that standing relationship where you see US companies starting to build in India, right? That is good for India. That is good for the US.
Okay. Now let's talk about the gray zone. Okay. AI, privacy, and invisible laws. So, according to you, what scares you the more? The government spying us on the private companies, owing every click, message, and the locations that we create?
So, what scares me for gray zone? So, I think for the average person, they need to know that private companies scare me hell of a lot more than any government. So for gray zone, if you see governments, like I think we talked about this a little bit before, governments need courts. They need legal jurisdiction. It's bureaucratic. It's a process. Even the bureaucratic process has oversight of the bureaucratic process. It's crazy. But private companies have a standing law that have you abide by, and there's no oversight of any of those processes. So what scares me in gray zone isn't governments per se, because there's always that international law, there's always that reflection between those two different nations. It's the private companies within those nations that scare me in gray zones, because that is how you're going to see locations, messages, your history, your face, your voice, the things that matter to the everyday person. That is going to affect you, because that is going to be the difference whether or not that information starts getting shared, getting sold, and how that information is going to be really taking your money out of your wallet, and you be happy about that through what they sell to you or what they're trying to sell to your family members. That's really what gray zone for me, that's what I'm concerned with. The large warfare that everyone think is going to happen with World War III, like, yeah, that's scary, but the real aspects to the everyday person is so much more scary than that, and that's private companies.
So do you believe that the social media apps right now, that whatever we have, that is coming under the gray zone?
Absolutely. Yeah, so like imagine if I were to tell you, I'll give you this drug, right? But this drug, all you have to do is say yes, and it's going to make you feel good, but I'm going to take away 3 hours of your time for the next 3 weeks, every single day. Would you agree to that?
No.
So like that is what private companies do, and that is what social medias do. But people do it. People consent to it. They check the block, say, yeah, sure, you can have everything. So you end up having this perfectly curated social media reel that will pull you into the next one to then sell you something. So I didn't even mention that all of this is backed by AI that is going to end up telling you, hey, let me show you this thing. You might dive into the next 2 hours of your life. You don't know where they went. And then I offer you something that you uniquely need in your life right now. And you're willing to pay top dollar to do that because you're having an emotional response, right? You have that emotional reasoning, and you go ahead and purchase that thing. So if I were to tell you I would give you something that all you have to do is say yes, I take 3 hours of your time, and I'm going to take $100 out of your pocket, and that's going to happen every single week until you stop taking the drug, will you still take it?
No.
No, right? It's crazy to me.
But that's the problem. The people are thinking about, I have nothing to hide, right? I don't care about the privacy. According to you, how it dangerous?
How, could you repeat the question?
the peoples are thinking about that. I don't believe in the privacy. I have nothing to hide about life. So they are mostly putting the post in the social media. According to you, is it a more dangerous than thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. That's very dangerous thinking. So ignoring something doesn't make you safe, right? I'm going to say that again for people who are checking in and out by now. Ignoring something doesn't make you safe. That's very dangerous thinking. It makes you vulnerable. So that's like saying, I've never been personally robbed, so I'm not going to lock my front door. That's what it's like, right? So we call this an information advantage. So for privacy isn't about hiding something. It's about handing strangers a weapon that they can use against you for their personal gain. That is what privacy is really about. And no one's talking about it. So think about your credit score, your bank information, or your relatives being duped, right? Because they have your voice, they have your likes, your interests. They can replicate all of that with very little data in the age. So privacy is protection from you getting taken advantage of and your loved ones. That's what the front door is for. That is why you have a lock on it. That is what privacy is for.
Okay. So according to you, can you just example of the attitudes that right now the peoples are really destroying themselves? Ignorance is my...
I'm trying to get at to what you mean by that question.
So, can you just give me that example of how that one attitude that destroy someone?
An attitude that will destroy someone, like in their own self. That's a really good question. I think it's building momentum. So in Everydayspy, we have this internal exclusive group called Skunkworks. And in Skunkworks, I talked about this recently, talking about building momentum. And you can build positive momentum and you can build negative momentum. So the attitude that you're speaking about is really building momentum in one direction. It's either serving you and it will multiply over time. You'll get energy back. You'll get money back. You get a return from the value and effort that you put in with a positive return. But if you don't do anything, that is a decision also. Momentum is always in effect. You're either creating negative momentum or positive momentum. So everything that was positive, if you stop doing it, if you start engaging in destructive behaviors, if you start thinking about worrying about yourself and not worrying about the world around you, that is all going to head you towards negative momentum. And it's not going to serve you.
Right. I totally agree. So according to you, can you just describe the gray zone conflict that no country declares the war, but the people's mind, money, and the freedom get attacked every day? What does that look like?
Sure. We can talk about what that might look like. I think a common example for what most people will hear inside the United States is the South China Sea, and we could talk about that if you want. So, first, I'll paint a picture of what is a gray zone for those who have possibly never heard of it. I want you to think it's essentially a slow mugging where nobody calls the police, but technically also no punches were ever thrown. That is what a gray zone conflict is like. It looks something like, think a handful of Marines living on a rusted out World War II ship that is deliberately grounded on a reef in the Philippines for the past 25 years, just so they can hold a spot geographically, right? And then China wants them gone, but they can't just attack, right? Because the Philippines have a defense treaty with the United States. And that would cause a World War III to occur, right? China directly attacking the US troops. It just wouldn't happen, right? That's what it means by that slow mugging. So what does China do instead? You start seeing anything that you've seen recently on the news. It's going to be water canyons. It's going to be ship ramming. It's going to be like military lasers blasting loud sounds over huge speakers. It's fishing vessels, not Navy ships, fishing vessels that start blocking main supply routes, right? So that is what I want you to think what gray zone is. People are getting hurt. People are being impacted. Territory is being exchanged. It's being taken. And international law is in this gray area. But that's what people in the gray zone, that's what that conflict, that's what world powers, or that's what comes to mind when people think gray zone. But I do want to share where I think other intelligence officers or people that are my peers or other intellectuals that know about intelligence, they may disagree with me. So I view gray zone as a type of conflict where different people or different views will be impacted also, right? It's the intangibles. I love calling this intangible conflict. So I like to use the analogy, it's when that wolf outside your door stops looking like a threat because you got used to it looking on the other side of the door, right? You become normal to it. It's when your money doesn't go as far as it did last year. It's when you can't say what you said 2 years ago because it's going to get you fired or locked up in today's world, right? It's a slow war on your culture, your values, your sense of what you think is normal. So by the time you end up realizing it, you've already lost so much ground that you're sure as hell not going to get back. So like you end up seeing this in the UK right now, for example. So like police are making dozens of arrests every single day because of like what you post on Twitter or what you post on social media, right? It's not threats that they're posting. It's not violence is what they're posting. They're posting opinions that someone else decided that was offensive. And so you start seeing this as a sort of cultural erosion, because if I can shift you 1 degree right now, in 10 years, you're a completely different country, right? You see this happening over the past 5-6 years inside the United Kingdom. You start seeing this in parts of the United States right now, and it should be alarming. This is what new gray zone conflict look like.
So do you believe that government are opposed of freedom of speech?
No. That's why I love being an American, is because we are protected by our free speech, right? That's something the rest of the world doesn't have.
Yeah, agree. So according to you, how close are we in the AI system that killing the people on the battlefield without a human making that choice?
Yeah, I would say like we're not close to that. We're already there. You saw that in Ukraine. So like Ukraine is what we call a live test bed or a testing. You see it as a testing area. So you saw drones that pick their own targets. Like all of this is open and public knowledge for anyone who wants to just Google it. You saw swarms that kill, like in coordination kills without a pilot or someone hitting the button. You saw like China is building the same thing at like an industrial scale. You see it, they're testing their equipment on a very mass scale, public displays. You think that's all entertainment? No, every company in China wants large, and once China sees that it can be used for military use, China owns it. There's no distinguishing. There's no private companies in China. Like the next generation of warfare is already here. It's just people aren't paying attention to it.
So according to you, do you believe that data could be the most weaponized for the country to destroy that?
I think for governments, data is the new weapon. For businesses, attention is the new currency.
So according to you, what kind of data? So the peoples are really like, they are posting everything on the social media. Okay, they are very blunt and they are using the freedom of speech. How the government or any other, our, let's say the rival, the country, how they are using our data to destroy the country? What kind of a data they are?
How are they using our data to destroy the country is your question?
Yes.
I don't think they're using it to destroy the country. I think everyone. So there's something that's called, that I love, is perspective versus perception, right? Your perception is what you personally have, the lens that you're looking through. Perspective is whenever you're able to take that lens, step a few degrees to the left, step a few degrees to the right, and you have a new lens. You have another perception, a perspective from someone else. So whenever you take that same idea and you apply it to that question, right? I don't think that companies or people or governments are trying to destroy our nation. I think what they're doing is serving their own interests, because they're serving their own interests. People are naturally selfish. They're naturally imposing from their own perception. So when you take that framework and you believe that and you start seeing that, you can start seeing how other companies aren't doing it, selling your data to benefit the destruction of America. They're doing it to put money in their pocket and their revenue this quarter go up. When you see terrorists post different things that will slowly gain the aspects of a new recruit, it's not because they want to see something destroyed. It's because they want to see their interests come to fruition, right? So when you see your social media reels, when you see China propaganda, those are all things that's serving those interests. Remember when I said it's not about the relationships, it's about your permanent interests?
Well,
that's
correct,
that's what I mean by that.
Okay. So according to you, suppose if AI disaster in a war, who would be the responsible? Programmer, journal, or the company or the government? Did you see that Mission Impossible 4?
No, I didn't. What was it about?
So that was about the AI system. Okay, that was hack all the informations from all the government, like the US, Russia, and everywhere, China. Okay, so he's controlling the system. Now he's about to launch the missiles on every country. Okay, so do you believe that if something was happen like that, who would be the responsible for?
Yeah, that's a that's a really good question. So I think there's always someone to blame, right? There's always going to be somebody to blame. So whoever gets blamed, the reality, if that does something like that does occur, there's going to be a new company. There's going to be a new invention. There's going to be new code. There's going to be a new person that replaces it. It's going to be a place that the same thing is just going to occur, just with slightly better, slightly less disaster, slightly less fallout from the same thing. So if AI did cause a disaster, I think it won't stop governments still putting effort towards that area. In fact, it's like every government knows, especially if you're an American listening to this right now, you need to have a longer attention span than just 3 weeks. And when I say that is, do you remember what happened 3 months ago? Do you remember what happened last year? Right? In terms of events, whatever's not in your focal realm of attention, you start forgetting. So when things start happening, the only way you're going to make a change is if you put people in place at your local level that's going to elect the next echelon above to put your interests and start serving your interests. So if you want that change to happen, you want to start paying attention to what the real world is. Like I was sitting recently with my dad. I went over to his house and the evening news popped up, right? And I haven't watched the public news probably well over a decade. And I remember growing up, it would be like an hour long of them just bombarding you with information. But I'll tell you, man, like it was so surprising when I turned on that news and I watched it. It was 30 seconds of headline material that invoked fear, invoked shame, invoked anger. And then it was a commercial. And then it went 5 minutes and then another headline, another 20 minutes, another headline. And that's it. There was no journalism. There was no journalistic standards. There was no background information. And they painted a picture that exactly what you wanted to see. So like if AI occurred a huge disaster, governments know, the American government knows, other governments know, we just don't have to talk about it. Give them 3 weeks, give them something else to chew on. That's their new squeaky toy to pay attention to, and forget about it. We'll replace it with a new brand, a new company, and keep doing the same thing.
Yeah. They put you in the assumption, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what does the first big AI-powered conflict look like? Not a science fiction, a real scenario in the next 10 years.
The next big conflict, like like a World War III type of thing.
Yeah.
See what's coming to mind right now. I think like really, truly, what we just spoke about, like we're already there, man. I see like an AI-powered conflict. When you say that, to me, it looks like a curated social media reel that shifts your allegiance to your country, to your community, to your values, and it shifts it just 1 degree. Because over the next 3 years, over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years, you probably know when you start 1 degree off over a long distance, that's miles apart. And so I think that is what World War III really looks like, which ties into gray zone, which ties into like AI. I think like that is where we're really at, and it's already started.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, last question. If you could warn the world leaders about the next 10 years in a one sentence, what would you say?
So this kind of hits home for me, man. I'm going to be honest with you. I say that because as a former veteran, so if you're a soldier out there, if you're currently serving, or if you previously served, thank you. But imagine preparing for World War III, which I hope never occurs. I'll tell the future leaders that there's always a negotiation that can be made. And people misunderstand what negotiations are. A good negotiation is whenever both people, both parties come out on the other side ecstatic, right? They come out better than they went in, and they both think it's a good deal. But I'm going to say for those who wish harm on others, those who want that destructive interest, I'll also educate the leaders to remember that your carrot always is accompanied by a big stick, right?
Whenever the people are think about the intelligence officers, the people thinks that it could be the like James Bond, right? The chasing, killings, the guns, car chases, explosions. So when did you work as a intelligence officer? How that actually job look like?
Yeah, so as an intelligence officer, you do some really cool stuff, but it's nothing like Hollywood or James Bond. That's maybe 1 or 2% of us in the community, right? For the rest of real intelligence work, most intelligence work is boring. It's going to be boring to most people. It's a lot of paperwork, a lot of meetings, a lot of things like that. Real intelligence work is like really cognitive heavy. I like to use the analogy of what I call the blank white puzzle. You might have heard of it from people in the intelligence community. Well, you can imagine a 100-piece puzzle, but that 100-piece puzzle is scattered, it's random, you don't have a reference, and it's all one color, right? It's all black or all white or all yellow, whatever it is. And your job in intelligence is to put together enough of a picture in a short enough amount of time to communicate what you think that picture is to someone who's going to be calling the shots, who's going to be launching missiles or having a negotiation or moving troops around the world. That's what intelligence work is like.
So what was the most boring things that you have done when you were an intelligent officer?
The most what?
The most boring work.
The most boring work? I would have to say it would be something like, for me personally, is something called security management, where all you're doing is looking at people's clearances as they come through a door. You're looking and you're matching that their name is on this roster, and you verify some credentials. Imagine doing that for 18 hours.
Wow. And that for how many years you have done?
Total in intelligence work, both private and in government, it's about 12 or 14 years, depends how you look at it.
Oh, wow. Okay. So when that intelligence man and the normal man, okay, when talk about the mindset, suppose let's take a hypothetical questions. Okay. Suppose if we are on an airport and a crowded street, what are the first three things that you notice that regular people completely missed out?
Yeah, I think we are uniquely trained to always evaluate and mitigate risk. And what I mean by that, you can think of it like people, places, and things, right? We look at the place, the physical space that we are just traveling through, we're navigating through. What is going to give us that advantage in that space, right? So we think about that in terms of the place. We think about in terms of people, right? So we view people as assets. We view people as resources, specifically wells of information, right? Every person has the knowledge of the local streets or the local vendors, when to go down this alleyway versus when you're not supposed to go down that alleyway, right? They have wells of information. And the last thing that we look at is things, right? The things in that space, specifically that is going to give us an advantage or we should be aware of. So for most of us out there is going to be the world of technology. And what I mean by technology is always recording, it's always observing, it's always putting you in a place and it's painting a picture of some kind. And as an intelligence officer, you have to think on what is the objective picture that I have to adhere to that matches what technology says I'm doing.
Okay. So suppose if you're on a street and if you are following someone, okay. So are you gonna focus only that particular person, or yet you are observing the other things that making around too?
Yeah, everything all at the same time. But we are trained to prioritize. That's what's going to give us the highest return for the effort that we're putting towards.
Oh, okay. So can you just tell about the time that when you get to know that something bad was coming? So days or a week before the news broke, what tip of you?
Yeah, so we use a paradigm or a model called the cone of uncertainty for things like that. And the cone of uncertainty, I want you to imagine just a cylinder cone, like, my brain always goes to like the cheerleading megaphones, where it's small on one end and large on the other end. And I want you to imagine that as the cone gets smaller, at the smallest point, it's somewhat transparent. You can see through it. And I want you to imagine hundreds and thousands of different colors yarn or strings, cables, wire, whatever it is, different colors, different textures, all entering the cone. You don't know what is going to happen in the future, but as it nears the present, you start to get a better idea of what exists. But at a point of certainty, what comes out on the other end of that cone, it's historical record, it's observable fact. You know what is coming out on the other end. So for all those who are business oriented, you're probably thinking about the next quarter, right? And you're sometimes getting overwhelmed of the next time that your business is going to go under, or you're worried about your business going under. Well, you can see the past 6 months, the past 3 months, the past month, the past week, your business still exists. So it's unlikely that it's going to just fail next week, right? That happens over time. It happens progressively. Same thing happens in terrorist operations or military operations. We assess those things towards the future, and we have indicators as they get closer.
So in your life, does it happen that if anything you want to just break down, but any tiny details that help you to break down that case? Do you have any example that you already solved that? on the basis of the tiny detail?
So for the tiny details, we use that as data points. We reference details as data points. In maybe something we'll talk about here coming up is something called the intelligence continuum. And the intelligence continuum is it's how we are trained to think as intelligence officers. We have what's called data. Everyone thinks they know what data is, but data is an absence of any context, is just points that you can reference, right? But as we apply context and we get clusters of those data points, that starts propagating what we call and what we know to be information. And when we take that information and we're able to progress that through an experience, either a learned experience or a self-learned experience, we're able to develop what we call knowledge. And that's what knowledge is. We're able to take those insights that we've developed through experience and come out what we call intelligence, because intelligence allows us to build something very specific towards a particular problem.
Okay. So can you just tell me the difference being a paranoid and being a smart? Where do you draw that line?
Yeah. So I want to first start saying healthy paranoia isn't bad. Healthy paranoia is what keeps you alive.
What do you mean by healthy paranoia?
Yeah. So what is paranoia first, right? Before we know what healthy paranoia is, we need to know what paranoia is. So let me use my definition. It's just an amplification of an experience, specifically a traumatizing. So you have to understand also trauma doesn't mean destructive. It means you have a learned involuntary reaction that is there to help you survive. So use the example here. I like to use the example here. Like if you were to get slapped in the face, right? You just learned whenever I raise my hand, you might flinch, you might lean back.
Correct.
That's not a bad thing. That is a learned, healthy, traumatized response, right? That's going to help you survive, right? So you see this with really harsh breakups, right? So if you ever had a nice, good-looking woman or a good-looking man or whatever your thing is, right? Is whenever you had that harsh breakup, there was also a point where you reflected and you're like, I ain't doing that again. And you go 180 degrees to something else. That was a traumatized response to help you try and survive. So in intelligence work, anxiety is pretty much like a superpower. It's your trauma. It's all the things that helps you maintain a learned healthy trauma response. It sharpens you.
Right. So is there any cause that turns you into the fear that ruin your life at that time?
So yes, but here's where I draw that line, right? The line is where that trauma stops serving you. It stops becoming productive. It starts becoming counterproductive to you. It starts with lowering your quality of life. It lowers the quality of your relationships. It lowers the quality of your ambitions, right? That's whenever trauma or paranoia starts to become opposing your own interests, right?
So is this true that when you become an intelligence officer that you should not declare your positions or about the jobs into your family?
So yeah, there's really a taboo around this. A lot of the world, a lot of what we do is largely unclassified. Now, here in the United States, there was a new law or a new regulation or policy, if you will, that was put in place where a lot of that unclassified information is now what's called controlled unclassified information. The only difference there is that now you can't share it with the public versus 3 years ago you could, right? And it was there for like legal reasons. It doesn't make those things secret. It just makes those things not publicly available, right? So largely speaking, a lot of intelligence work is unclassified. It's just not shareable. And so when we can't communicate things to our partners, our families, or even people that have every business knowing what we do on a regular basis, we can't share it because we signed a paper that said we won't.
No, okay. So I just wanted to know, okay, there's one situation that I saw in a movie that suppose if you want to be a part of a team of your enemy, okay, so that your intelligence teams wants to decide that you will be the part of our enemy, but that's our hidden target. Okay, you will have a hidden target. So you become a spy for us, and your social media profile or your all the public profile will be removed or it will be vanished from all over the place. Are you guys doing that?
That absolutely happens. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It does happen, but it doesn't happen in that way. Right. So it's when people are recruited, they go through a few different processes, but some processes you get that tap on your shoulder that gets you into that next group of people, that gets you tapped in to bring into the next group of people. And now you're working for a super secret agency that you can't even name. Right. Other times, you just apply on the website. You sign on the dotted line and you start work on Monday, right? So there's a progression and a nuance onto those things, but absolutely, those sort of things do happen, and they don't just scrub your existence. Sometimes your existence kind of just fades away into the background, and it's put a lot of, let's say, hay over that needle. So it's really hard to find that needle in that haystack. Other times you just get added so many new needles instead of putting on that haystack. So if anyone wants to search for you in Mexico, your name might be Alejandro, and Alejandro has all of his backstops and all of his social medias up to date for the past 10 years. But you fly over to Spain or any other region, right? You might have another name with a whole completely different backstop. And those things are just maintained in the background. So everywhere that you go, that is you, but a different version of you slightly.
Wow. Okay. So if you can teach me like the entire intelligence mindset in 5 minutes, what would you write on the whiteboard?
Yeah. So I would draw, if you had to think like an intelligence officer right now, I would teach you that intelligence continuum, how you're going to take data, apply context to it, and you're going to start having information. Whenever you can start distinguishing the differences between data, information, knowledge, that point from knowing something, right, information, and knowing that if you go and get someone's experience, that they applied that information, or you go and have that experience for yourself, you start developing real knowledge that you can use. But here's the thing is that I think is the most valuable thing here is when you apply it to a specific decision or a specific objective or any desired outcome that you want to create, you start tailoring that and you start developing what we call intelligence. That is what intelligence is. But intelligence has a shelf life. Okay. It's relevant only for so long before it starts to expire. So knowing when and how you're going to take what you learned and apply it to what you're trying to accomplish, that is the game-changing mindset that an untrained mind don't stand a chance against someone who's thinking like that.
So what's the one habit that you can copy tomorrow to think more clearly?
I would wake up, and it's going to sound crazy when I say this, but yes, it is this simple. When I tell people this, they're like, that doesn't work. And it 100% works. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, within the first 10 minutes of waking up, just go ahead and drink a tall glass of water. Consume that in the first 10 minutes. Drink a glass of water. And right before you engage in any sort of cognitive work, have some fruit. It doesn't matter if it's dates or apples or bananas or anything like that. Have some fruit. Watch when you engage in that thing, you're going to be fully resourced and you're going to be really focused for sharpness, clarity, processing, all.
Wow. Okay. So you want to say that whatever you do in your life, Just be engaged with that.
Engage with it, because you're wasting your time otherwise. Why would you want to be a passerby to it, right?
Right. I agree. Okay, let's another hypothetical questions. Okay, let's say I'm running a startup in Mumbai. What warning signs in my own company that should I watch for? The same way you watch for the conflict.
Yeah. So what you're really asking here is in part analytical thinking, but
Correct.
also like a counterintelligence, what we call counterintelligence, opposing intelligence, right? From your competitors, from anyone else that's wishing to do you harm, whether it be something or someone, right? So I want you to recall that cone of uncertainty. And remember that cone of uncertainty, that part that is transparent. We have what we call indicators, something called leading indicators and lagging indicators. And when you tailor this to behavioral indicators with people or information or money, right, you start seeing a pattern erupt. So this leading indicator, what is a leading indicator? A leading indicator is any forward-looking signal that changes before an outcome occurs, right? It gives you early warning, and it allows you a window of opportunity to intervene with that thing. And then you have what's called a lagging indicator. Lagging indicators are those backwards looking. It's the things that just left the cone that is a fact and a certainty, right? Those things are that whenever that outcome happens, whenever that observable happens, you can confirm what has happened, right? That offers you a limited time to alter that cone ever so slightly, right? Because now you know where it's heading.
So suppose, let's say that we are meeting in a coffee shop. Okay. So what are the tiny details or what are the informations that you are looking for? Suppose maybe that you are also taught for the body language also, right? So if I want to crack down anything outcome from the meeting, if I want to deal with you, okay, what are the informations that I should looking for when I do the meeting with you as an intelligent officer?
Yeah. So I look at, I'm going to say one very important thing, changes in that environment, changes in that person, changes in the type of tone, the volume, who's speaking, the power shifts that change. We look at those changes of all of those different data points, right? We call that baselines and changing from those baselines. So, and a reference or a callback that I like to have here is if anyone who's ever taken a polygraph test, imagine sitting in a chair where these wires are hooked up to you. It even has like this pad that you sit on. So when your sphincter actually, you tighten up, it'll register that. All of those things are pulses or changes in that deviation. Changes in that deviation is changes in those baselines. It's all data that you can take and apply context to. So whenever we're negotiating and having that meeting, whenever you start talking about a certain topic, your tone changes, your body position changes, your open-ended questions become closed questions, and you try to shut down that part of the conversation. I know a change has occurred. Why that change occurred, that's where we start leaning into, right?
So, but the intelligent officer has been like they are specialized to teach out the polygraphic test too, right? Suppose right now we are talking, okay, and I want to be a poker face, okay. You don't want to catch me, okay. I don't want me to catch you, right? So at that time, what kind of training that you have did that why that polygraphic test has been teach you? How did you do that?
So in polygraph tests, you don't want to lie, right? Because it checks for all of those deviations from the baseline. But I would say if you're going to lie, know that it checks for baseline changes. So if your baseline is super abrupt or erratic or lots of variance, right? All of those things that there's a wide space between that base, that gives you more leeway. So if you talk a whole lot, keep talking a whole lot. If you're very reserved and quiet, but you're super nervous all the time, keep that consistent, right?
Okay. So in your life, that what are the habits from the intelligence works that you're still using in a normal life? What are that one habit?
One habit, I would have to say there's something that really resonated with me when I first learned it, and I haven't ever stopped thinking about it since. It's who has control, right? You're either, and it's an uncomfortable truth, but whenever you can settle with that truth, you know that you can give control to someone and be okay with that, or you can take control. Someone has control over you, over what you do, over everything that is going to happen, right? You may not like it. You may not be able to impact it, but you are given control. So think of like whenever you go and you work at some job, whatever that job is, most people have a boss. They have control over what you're doing. Now, you have control over your decisions, but that is within the scope of what they've already demanded for you to do, right? Go ahead and not do any work for 3 weeks. See if you're still in control of that paycheck coming in, right? It's not going to happen. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. It really sounds interesting. Okay. So as an intelligence agency spy on terrorists and enemy countries, but do they also watch CEOs, influencers, and regular people too?
Short answer to that, I'm going to say no. And that might be surprising to most people. So intelligence agencies aren't tracking your Instagram, right? They don't care if you're cheating on your wife or sending racial memes to your friends. Like, they don't care about that. They don't care about any of that. The reality is that intelligence work is way more boring and way more bureaucratic than movies make it out to be. We spend most of our time in meetings and writing reports and tracking the next threat, the next impending threat, and trying to predict those next threats. So the sexy surveillance stuff that requires all of that cool stuff, it requires lawyers, it requires judges, it requires a mountain of paperwork to do. And honestly, like, why would a government spend their resources looking at their civilians? The actual threats, that is what's keeping intelligence agencies busy. They're not looking at your Instagram reels.
Oh, okay. So in a movie that it shows that the people or the officers are mostly intercepts the call, right? They are trying to get the hidden things from the call. So the government is recording all the calls that for all public, or just the specific one that you are intercepting?
Yeah, so it depends on what country you live in, right? But let's say major countries, specifically the US, I have to be careful here. When you get to a point where you affiliate yourself with a threat to the US national security, you can be sure someone is watching you. You can be damn sure someone is watching.
Okay.
Someone's listening to that. Someone's recording that. Someone's tracking that, because you just affiliated yourself with a threat to U.S. national security. And it's like that for every country around the world.
Makes sense. So you have worked with the Trump and Obama both, right?
In part, yeah.
Oh, okay. So how did that intelligence change? Not the politics, but the actual work.
Yeah. So honestly, the biggest change wasn't in the White House who's sitting there, right? That wasn't the change that happened. For us, under Obama, almost everything I touched was focused on counterterrorism. It was post 9/11. We were running full speed towards the Middle East, right? Whereas under the Trump administration, the conversation shifted hard towards China, towards other major national threats. It was different targets. It was different tradecraft. It was different tempo. But all of that happened all at the same time. It's just where those priorities shifted is where the budget started filling up one bucket and reduced funding for the other bucket, while things were happening in terms of technology. The technology got better, right? So for us, it was the technology got way better. The data that you had access to got way bigger. The pressure that you were always under, that was more. right? So the core job never changed, but what we did, how we were oriented, slightly changed, because someone was always looking at terrorism, someone was always looking at China, someone was always looking at other major threats. But where majority of us focused shifted. And I'll tell you, like, in intelligence, regardless of how technology improves, when you understand people, you can predict the behavior. And that's been true since the beginning of intelligence, right? So since 1776 for Army intelligence, and since OSS for the CIA, right? Understanding people has always been predictable.
Do you believe that after coming the technologies, like that we are evaluate so many things in the technology, do you think that after that the intelligence officers' jobs more insights rather than on the field work?
I think there was a shift in the community, probably somewhere around 2016, 2018. It was that shift on, hey, we should probably start looking at big data, because AI was becoming more prevalent. But AI been around since the early 2000s for us, right? What really shifted was that we understood how to work with big data, but the core of our job never changed. So the CIA still focused on human intelligence. The NGA still focused on geospatial intelligence, right? The looking at of the world, right? Or the NSA still focused on what's called signals intelligence, or the things with technology and computers and stuff like that.
Okay. So which presidencies made your job harder?
I wouldn't say harder. I would say different, right? So a lot of our paperwork that we had to undergo was focused around terrorism for Obama, where a lot of our paperwork has to undergo legalities and more judicial processes because of international law in South China Sea, for example.
Okay, let's have a rapid fire round. Okay. That's a one word option. No explanation needed. Okay. Start. Pakistan or India? Pakistan or India?
India.
American intelligence or raw?
Or where?
Raw.
American intelligence.
Indian intelligence. Okay.
Yeah.
American or China?
America.
Modi or Trump?
For different reasons, but I think I'm going to have to align with Trump.
All right. Okay. Torture or truth?
Truth.
Patriot or traitor?
Patriot.
Drone strike or ground invasion?
Drone strike.
Ally or enemy?
Enemy.
Democracy or stability?
Democracy.
Surveillance or freedom?
That's a hard one, man. Oof. I'm going to get some backlash on this, but surveillance.
Okay. Nuclear first strike or conventional war?
Man, these are hard. Conventional war, because it takes so much to get there.
Yeah, exactly. Collateral damage or mission failure? This is the hardest one.
I think as much as it goes against my personal fiber, mission failure.
Oh, okay. You don't like a collateral damage?
No.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. It was really enjoying. For my
thank
opinion,
you so much.
It's one of the best podcasts ever that I made.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Take care.